For the most part, competitive Pokemon is a game of knowledge. One of the main aspects which separates experienced players from the new ones is how much experience and metagame knowledge they have. Pokemon asks players to be aware of general data like moves, abilities, EVs and the like, as well as more intricate aspects like strategy and the wide variety of luck factors. However, excelling at this game is not only about knowledge. Pokemon demands that the player develops many skills in order to use that knowledge to the best of their abilities. This is what we'll be covering today. In this video we'll be talking about skills that you as a Pokemon player need to develop in order to reach a higher level of play. If you've been playing for a while, you may already be aware of them, but if you've only started playing competitively recently, it might be a good idea to look into them. These are skills that I found most prominent in Pokemon, but they may also be demanded in other aspects of life as well. As such, we'll start with the one that is most present within the game, and that is critical thinking. Pokemon is a strategy game. It demands that the player analyzes each match objectively in order to come up with a proper game plan, having victory as the ultimate goal. Being able to look at all possible options and to choose the best one is probably the most concrete way to achieve that. While it is possible to select moves without even thinking, this is not advisable in the grand scheme of things. Clicking the wrong move can stop you from making progress or simply cost you the game altogether. Looking over each of your options objectively will allow you to properly grasp the situation and therefore make better decisions during the game. This is something that is cultivated over time. The more you understand about the game, the more you'll be able to look at the bigger picture and have a better notion of how games are actually won. Nothing is free, of course. You're eventually going to make mistakes and possibly lose games. It is part of the learning experience. But looking over said mistakes and trying to figure out what you could have done better in those scenarios is what will help you in the long run. We can say that thinking critically applies to the team building aspect of Pokemon too, as you also need to properly think and decide what works better for your team and which tools will let your strategy become a reality during battle. Everything has a logic behind it, even if a flawed one. But know that most players try to find a logic that suits them best, and this is only possible by self-nurturing this skill. In contrast to this, while trying to make something out of the information at hand is important, there will be times where we are not able to analyze everything properly. In instances such as this, players rely on intuition, but this is normally founded within knowledge and rationale depending on the situation, and it is for the most part supported by the baseline of metagame knowledge they hold. Furthermore, regardless of how much you analyze and anticipate something, things might not work out as expected. Because of this, players constantly need to adapt to what the game demands. For all practical purposes, let's say you expect the opponent's Iron Valiant to be the Source Dance set, but at a certain point, it reveals it is actually a Calm Mind Sweeper. It is up to you as the player to dial it back and adapt your game plan with this new information. Now, I want to talk about a different aspect of critical thinking and critical analysis I barely touched upon, and this is the ability to self-criticize. At some point, you are undoubtedly going to do things that don't work out, either in the builder or in battle. But part of the process is being honest with yourself and consider that you can't do things perfectly all the time, following this up with ways to improve. If you're having trouble with this, you can always turn to someone who is more experienced or even analyze the games of players at a higher level in order to get a notion of how it is that they win consistently. In a context that is outside of Pokemon, critical thinking is about the most common skill you have to use. Being able to analyze the information at hand and make better decisions based off of it is the bread and butter of many jobs or even student tasks. Nurturing this skill may take a while. Not everybody can have the full picture in any activity or any field they start in just after they have begun doing it. But trying to figure out things for yourself, reflecting on what works and what doesn't, and why this is will help you get there. Of course, in order to do this, we need a high degree of discipline, which is the next skill I want to talk about. If you at any point of your life had to do an activity which requires some form of grinding, such as studying for an exam, handling a hard task at work, or even pursuing a personal goal, you might have been tempted to procrastinate. The act of putting things off or simply delaying them out of a feeling of not wanting to engage in them is perhaps the biggest enemy of somebody with any sort of goal in mind. As anything that is worth pursuing requires a certain degree of effort and dedication, competitive Pokemon is no different in this regard. Maybe you have a ladder goal in mind or a tournament you really want to win, it is all the same. Unless you cheat, they all require lots of effort and diligence even on the most tedious tasks. I met many accomplished people in different fields and competitions, and they all amount a big part of their success to the discipline they exert on the way to it. In Pokemon specifically, many of the top players I've been lucky enough to talk to over the years know this is a quintessential aspect of the game. Regardless of how talented you are, practicing and putting constant effort into the game is necessary in order to get to the top. This is not to say that you need to play a billion games every day, but dedicating time to build, play, and analyze on a regular basis is something that every consistent player does. Playing 20 games with a more conscious and analytic mindset will probably help you more than playing 100 of them mindlessly. That is, if your availability allows it. To many people, Pokemon is a hobby or a game they play on the side, which is totally fine. If you have other things to do and there's only so much time you can dedicate to the game, then that is understandable as well. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that spending your free time playing the game surmounts your other priorities. But if you are hoping to get to a certain level, you need to be aware that you are probably going to spend time polishing your game. If this is an issue, but you still want to get better, maybe analyze how much time and effort you want to put into the game and set realistic goals according to it, while also not beating yourself up for it. There is no guaranteed recipe for success. You have to do what works best for you, but also do it in a way which produces tangible results. However, one thing that I need to mention is that it will probably take time for you to get to your goal. As I said before, the good things don't come as easily in a competitive setting. That is why we need to have patience. This is something that has a twofold meaning in Pokemon. On the one hand, we need to be patient when it comes to our progress as a player. We need to understand that maybe we are not going to get to our goal in little time. Rather, we need to keep in mind that we might have to wait for our improvement to be noticeable. That is, if we are making a conscious effort for it. I may sound like a broken record by now, but I cannot stress this enough. There is no set time frame in which you'll be getting the desired results. Everybody makes progress at a different pace, and at the same time, it is not a good idea to compare ourselves to others. But those days, weeks, or months of dedication to the craft will eventually pay off. The second instance in which this skill comes into play is during our battles. Sometimes, a single battle will take long. Long is relative, but to give an example, imagine you find yourself in this situation. You cook this nasty team and you're eager to try it out, but then you click the Find Battle button and the first thing you see is this. This is where we need to calm ourselves down, analyze the situation, and decide on the best course of action. The key here, or in any similar scenarios, is to be patient. If we follow a proper game plan and stay cool, things might work out for us. This is a very explicit scenario, but I'm sure this concept applies to other fields and aspects of life as well. Maybe you are waiting for some midterm results, or to know if you landed a job. Or maybe your lovely neighbor starts drilling their walls just as you were about to record and you have to wait until they're done as your mic picks it up. We cannot control what kind of matchups we get or how certain events will play out, but patience, alongside our next skill, will help us confront them to the best of our ability. In Pokemon and life overall, you may face many difficult situations which happen sporadically. Maybe something unexpected happened, or maybe we screwed up in a big way and we are starting to spiral out of control. This is where we are at our weakest and where our emotions start to take over. Looking back, a lot of my losses in high-level play and many real-life situations where I messed up could be amounted to losing my cool and lacking resilience and the ability to bounce back from the unexpected in that particular moment. In Pokemon, there are a lot of ways in which a game can go south. A crit when it hurts the most, you got frozen and never thought out, or you simply were outplayed in the most apparently incomprehensible way that your blood starts to boil. But this is when we need to take a deep breath and chill. Avoiding tilt is probably one of the hardest things to do in Pokemon. But when we manage to do so, we may overcome even the least appealing of odds. I've seen many players, including myself, giving up after a turn 1 KO or crit, but I've also seen many instances where players got an exorbitant amount of bad luck but still came out on top because, cool as a cucumber, they took time to assess the situation properly. Pokemon is as much of a strategy game as much as it is luck-based. As such, it can be unpredictable to some degree. If we are to lose our head in situations where something unexpected happened, then the game was doomed from the start. Developing this skill is not only essential in Pokemon, but also outside of it. Many things can happen unexpectedly, and we, for better or worse, need to roll up our sleeves and face the problem head on. This is not to say we should act rashly. We need to leave our emotions behind and think deeply about the best course of action. Moving on from that, I've talked about how Pokemon is unpredictable in many ways, but then, is it really all luck? How is it that many top players win and are consistent regardless of good or bad odds? Well, a big part of it is thanks to proper risk management, which is the last skill we'll be talking about today. Correctly assessing the risks that may put our winning strategy in jeopardy is a big reason behind consistency in Pokemon. It is not about predicting hacks or when important luck will happen though. Proper risk management takes into account the possible outcomes in which your winning conditions may be affected by external causes, be it certain plays the opponent might make or even the game itself. Knowing this, we can make better decisions in terms of how to handle these potential threats during our game, and also identifying your win conditions early and calculating risk around keeping them intact is a key component to this approach. For example, let's say your win condition is Choice Band Dragapult, as it fares well against the opponent's team. It generates momentum with fast U-turns or could potentially get some easy KOs with strong Terra Blast goals due to the absence of sturdy ghost resists. Basically, you have a solid chance of winning if you use your Dragapult efficiently. In this case, the overarching strategy is to get Dragapult in battle as many times as possible while also avoid losing it until it has done its job. However, this doesn't mean Dragapult can't come in on any moves just to be preserved. You ponder at which point Dragapult can come in, take a hit, and make the most out of the situation, even taking the opposing Pokemon's coverage moves and luck into account. In other words, you have to consider if the reward of Dragapult successfully switching in, putting you in a winning position in the process, is just as big, if not bigger than the risk of it taking major damage and potentially losing a big asset to your overall strategy. You sometimes have to make a risky play in order to have a better chance of winning, or you might have to risk it all in order to keep yourself in the game even. Both scenarios are just as possible. Furthermore, odds can be so deceitful that unless you truly have the full picture, you will likely not do the math efficiently. In Pokemon, this is probably the most complex skill and the hardest one to learn. It combines different elements we've mentioned before. Knowledge, accurate critical analysis, and resilience are all part of it. Managing risks by taking different odds and scenarios into consideration in order to make the most accurate play is probably the pinnacle of Pokemon battling. That is, in terms of skill. Anyone can get to this level, but it takes a lot of effort, experience, and deep understanding of Pokemon itself. In other words, you actually have to play the game. Outside of it, maybe we are making a big change in our lives, could be in our careers or even in our relationships. It is at this point that we think about the risks it involves and what consequences it may have. Probably thinking about what I mentioned before will help us in making better decisions for ourselves. This is not exclusive to Pokemon, and it's present pretty much in any situation with multiple outcomes. And with that, folks, we made it to the end of this video. As I mentioned before, Pokemon is a side activity for many people, but that doesn't mean nothing can be learned from it. As a matter of fact, the game itself has shown me that many key aspects are present in things beyond our imagination. Sooner or later, it all amounts to something. I'm sure if you think more deeply about the skills you practice in this game either consciously or subconsciously, you'll see what I mean. That being said, the concepts shown in this video are not the only ones present within the game, so what I really want to know is, what are other skills you've developed and practiced thanks to Pokemon or any competitive game in general? Please let me know in the comments below. Before we leave, I want to thank these lovely people on your screen for their support on this video. I'll leave their channel links in the description. As always, many thanks for watching and see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.